Hey everyone, welcome to the Revillager podcast. This is our fourth session and ongoing live interview series as part of our Revillager Kickstarter, which is live now with just 11 days to go. Today, we have the honor of talking to Ben Goresky of Evolving Man. Ben is a counselor, a coach, a men's work leader, and an explorer of consciousness. He's been helping men become better men, overcome addiction, and create community through men's circles for over a decade. More recently, he's been leading conscious relationship trainings with his talented wife, and he hosts an incredible podcast with exceptional thought leaders. He also recently had a baby and is passionate about empowering integral fatherhood in our culture. He's a longtime close friend of both myself and my co-founder, Santi Koturi, who leads men's work retreats with Ben, and we'll both be in conversation with him today. So bringing him on now. Hey, Ben, welcome.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Santi, welcome.
Hey, everybody.
So this is super exciting. Ben's like a perfect person to talk to about what we're up to in Revillager, but also because of his work and the overlaps of not only our work, but also our friendship and our brotherhood. Ben and I go back, I don't even know how long, maybe 7, 8 years. Koturi and him are super close. Koturi, Santi.
What's up, Koturi?
And we're all part of a brotherhood called Arca Brotherhood, which is a men's work community and organization that both of them have leading roles in. And we've just been talking about all of this stuff ongoing throughout our relationship and our friendship, and it's brought us a lot closer. And today we're really just going to dive into some of the juiciest topics in this world. And, speaking about Ben, like he's an incredibly talented and skillful man and coach, and he's been leading a very successful project called Evolving Man, which has really great podcasts, really worth checking out. And I think what I'd love to start with is kind of, Ben, you sharing a bit of your story, starting with where you really was brought into this work. And from what I know of you, I know that the beginning perhaps was addiction recovery and your own journey with that, and then that leading you to healing through various forms, and then that leading you to men's work and relationship work and to the work you're now offering. So I'd love to just hear from you kind of your story from as far back as you want to go to finding your way to Evolving Man and to this work.
Okay. I'll see how I can do it without taking an hour, but also not 3 sentences. So the background or the overarching conversation here, right? Obviously with Revillager is community and relationships, right? And the importance of that and the importance of village. I grew up in a middle-class home with 2 older brothers, and we were provided for, and we had our struggles in that home. There was a lack of connection, a lack of emotional intelligence, and all 3 of us had our issues. At one point, all 3 of us were in an institution of some sort. My oldest brother was in an institution for schizophrenia, and my brother and I were both in rehab. I was 16 and he was 19 at the time. Actually, I went in when I was 15. I turned 16 in rehab. And at that point, I was a very lost, confused young man. I mean, who isn't kind of lost and confused at that age? Let's be honest. But I was really missing true, authentic human connection, a sense of community, a sense of togetherness, mentors, a connection to real mentorship. And, at that point in any young man's life, I feel like his dad isn't the guy to do that anyways. And so there needs to be some semblance of community to raise a young man. And so I end up in rehab against my will and formed a resistance for like months in there, pretty stubborn. But eventually, through relating and these sort of group sessions that we did together, and digging into my own stuff and realizing, like, uncovering my own pain, I started to crack and admit admit all of the darker, scarier, uh, wounding, the pain that was inside of me, and that sort of broke me through into recovery. And there they take you through the 12 steps. But I was in rehab for 13 months, and that was my first experience of really feeling connection and brotherhood. Um, in that rehab center, there was boys and girls, or teenage young men and young women, and we would have these full group meetings, and then other times we'd have like newcomers and old comers meetings, but we'd also have, they'd split the guys and the gals into meetings, and we would go and do our own processing and sort of therapy there. And those guys meetings were so powerful for me because there's this like really true, honest, authentic thing that comes up um, when the correct space is held. And that was like a beautiful place for healing for me, and I never forgot that. I always have the sense of what it was like to be in that room and the depth of work that we did in there, and there was a lot of healing that happened in that space. And so then I graduated rehab. I went back to high school. I had my issues. I still had to figure out how to live life without being like just a total rebel and anarchist. And I still got suspended from high school once in that year and a half, but I finished. And then I went back and worked at that rehab center for 3 years and discovered that I really liked being a peer counselor at the time, is what they call it. And the whole time going to AA meetings and being involved with that community and finding that community was really helpful for me in sort of holding my recovery, along with the graduates from the rehab center that I was friends with. So I sort of surrounded myself with um, these other graduates who were clean and sober, and then these older men generally in AA, and that held my recovery together. And I managed to stay clean and never relapse. A number of my friends did. Some of them came back. Some of them died. And there were times in my younger years there, like my late teens and early 20s, where I really saw how actually fortunate I was to have a community around me that knew me, knew my struggles. We had a common bond, and it kept me in the game. It kept me in the recovery game. And I really felt how, like, if I had moved away from that town, my chances of staying clean long term would have drastically reduced, because that community was really a big part of what was holding it together for me. And I really started to understand why church communities and just why people come together, because there's this thing that kind of can keep you alive at times and keep you happy and thriving. Um, and so from there, I went on to do a degree in addictions counseling. I went and worked at a treatment camp for young men in Alberta, 18 to 25-year-old men. We took them out into the wilderness and we would give them these challenges. And we were really sort of trying to work with the animal brain. And, that's kind of where your addiction lives too. That's this sort of like default survival network, and try to, bring these sort of top down strategies in: intention setting, mindfulness, connection to self, connection to heart, planning, debriefing. We would work with all of that to sort of reshape how guys perform under stress and really help connect them to a sense of spirituality. So, yeah, I did that for 3 years, and learned a lot. Learned a lot working there, and eventually found my way out to the coast. And long story short, took a break from addictions counseling, worked on business and understanding that, joined the Arca Brotherhood, and then got back into coaching and counseling, and yeah, trying to bring my wealth of experience to other people. So I work with people in the realm of addiction recovery, relationships, conscious relationship work, and men's work, which is really just like inner work for men, and some of the classic issues that come up with men, stuff around their father, shadow work. how to relate well to power and how to relate to other men. And that work I've just really loved and can't get enough of. So I got behind it big time and helped form the online division of the Arca Brotherhood. We have 15 online groups now, and eventually became co-director of the organization. So we've got 560 members right now, and there's a real growth spurt it's like a post-COVID growth spurt that's occurring for us. And this community is just like, it's so powerful. It changes men's lives. And so I'm super passionate about it. So yeah, that's kind of my summary on how I got to here. And yeah, guys, I'm thrilled to be having this conversation with you. As you guys know, I'm fully behind your vision with Revillager and have been watching it since the beginning, because I believe community and connection is the biggest medicine that we need in this world today, and it's the antidote to the divisiveness and the tribalism. And Johann Hari says that the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connection. And I very much believe that at the root of my addiction was this, the word loneliness when I was in treatment would bring me to tears if I just said, spoke about my loneliness and feeling of disconnection. And I feel like it's that connection to others and to self that truly gave me the recovery that I needed. And now I'm just doing my best to share that with others.
Thanks for sharing. Yeah, that's all really interesting. I mean, something you spoke to about the animal brain is really interesting. In our work and in the world of humane technology, there's a lot of conversation around that because of the way that technology has been designed to target the animal brain, to create addiction loops. And, we don't often think about addiction in terms of screen addiction. It's similar to caffeine or overproductivity. It's a culturally accepted addiction, and maybe addiction is too strong of a word, but the goal of big tech is to keep you engaged on the screen for as long as possible, and that's a lot to do with making money.
Yeah.
And that creates a kind of very powerful algorithmic monster that is very good at figuring out what keeps you on the screen. So similar to substance, how it solves a problem, which is suffering, screens and technology and social media solve a problem. But that problem is based in the animal brain, which is, a survival tactic.
Yep.
And it's really very much about, in a lot of ways, escapism from the real feelings and the real emotions and the real suffering.
Yeah.
And so you spoke to it really eloquently, and we're really impacted by Gabor Mate's work, and his latest book, Myth of Normal, speaks a lot to what you just shared around society and culture being built around isolation and individualism, and how that tear in the social fabric of humanity is really causing a lot of the trauma that we experience to turn into addiction and become these ways. And he speaks to, like, if I can quote, a society that fails to value communality, our need to belong, to care for one another, and to feel caring energy feeling towards us, is a society facing away from the essence of what it means to be human.
Yeah.
Pathology cannot but ensue. To say so is not a moral assertion, but an objective assessment, and he speaks to belonging, the core human needs of belonging, relatedness, connectedness, autonomy, mastery, genuine self-esteem, trust, and purpose, and then transcendence of, like, being part of something bigger than yourself. And I think that's something that I've noticed a lot of men go through when they come into men's circles, come into community. And like you said, a lot of men grow up in this hyper individualistic way where their father maybe wasn't present for them, wasn't able to bring them into manhood. The uncles or men in their life weren't able to mentor them and bring them into manhood. And so we find ourselves in these men's circles really yearning for, that community that was, I think, for most of humanity, was always there to bring you into manhood through rites of passage and through holding you accountable. And so I know my experience with men's work over the last decade has been profound, but I think that the community piece is actually key. You know, we can all do our individual men's work, and it's important that we do our individual work and seek out the therapy, but then doing it in community and having the reflections and getting better at speaking, relating to a group of men makes such a difference. And I'm curious, do you think that if we had more community in the world, we'd have less addiction? Do you think it's that obvious?
Yeah. Yeah. If we had more community and more connection between people and groups, I do believe we'd have less addiction. Yeah,
Mm,
I see them as directly correlated. And you know, at the young men's level, at the teen level, for sure, but also like at the early childhood attachment level. You know,
mm,
you're right about screens, and I'm really worried what we're going to see in kids 10 years from now, because
mm,
we've got parents who are addicted to their phones. And yeah, I used to argue that some of these more subtle things are not addiction. Like I do argue that like you can't be addicted to coffee, like unless coffee's causing major harm in your life. Like shut up. It's a dependency. Okay, it's a habit. Yes, you have withdrawal, but that's a dependency. But an addiction causes negative consequences in your life and to the life of people around you. And I saw a 2.5-year-old girl with her mom the other day on the ferry, and the little girl was like bored and her mom was exhausted, and she was like, I want your phone so I can watch this thing. And her mom was like, I don't want to give you my phone. I don't want to give you my phone because then you don't give it back. And I was like, that's interesting. And then I saw the little girl just like crawling around on the chairs and trying to keep herself busy while the mom was on her phone, just staring at her
mm,
phone, ignoring her kid and telling her kid to like bug her off, you know? And I was like, wow, like this is addiction right here. And what is that child experiencing when they're seeking connection and attachment with their parent, and their parent is staring at a black box instead of them? You know, like kids they need our attention,
mm,
and they see us staring into these little black mirrors, right?
mhm,
So, you know, we're going to find out in 10, 20 years when those kids are adults and they're talking about, and we're just seeing the prevalence of mental illness and addiction and the consequences of disconnection. So I think we're going to see consequences at every level, and that we already do.
mm,
And a lot of mental illness and addiction is getting worse, not better. We're solving a lot of like health problems, like hospitals and are getting better at doing surgeries, and our emergency medical care is great, but there's like more people on drugs, prescription and otherwise, than ever before. And screens are like, they're like candy, they're like sugar for the eyes and for the brain, you know.
mm,
And I think most people now agree that sugar is basically a toxic substance for the body, and it's addictive. It pulls us away from our natural state. So yeah, we do need things that facilitate IRL, in person, hands-on, screens off behavior. And it makes sense to me that actually there will be technologies that will facilitate that. My friend
mm,
Jivan over at the Human 11 project is working on something as well to change the way that we interface with our phones, with our devices,
mm,
and to check every time you turn on your phone, check in and like direct like where you're trying to put your energy and be intentional about it.
mm,
And that's what it's all about. I think, you know, that's the next wave is you know, people who are awake and people who are asleep. And yeah, my hope is that Revillager contributes to the awake side of things, and my hope is that I can be a part of that too.
mm, mm,
Yeah, so just to bring it back to the men's work that you're talking about, like
mhm,
I just want to. Santi was just with me in California running a men's weekend where we did 3 days with a group of 17 guys, and these are grown men, most of them in their 30s, a couple of them in their 40s, and we had one man who was 50 years old. And all of these guys came in carrying the stress of their lives, the nervousness of being in a container together with other men. All of this, like, we all carry kind of our like teenager and young man experience with other boys in the schoolyard, bullying, rejection, etc. And told that who we are isn't good enough, or not cool, not okay. And we sort of come into these containers fearful, nervous, afraid to speak our truth, hiding our hearts, armored up, with this sort of like, else, we'll see kind of energy. And through the work that we did and the connection exercises and just really dropping in together for 3 days, where the guys were at the end of that 3-day experience was just completely different. There was this element of grounded honesty, eyes up connection, not afraid to speak the truth to one another. And virtually every one of those men claiming, like we just said, hey, just check in here on the final day. Like, what do you want to take home with you? Free form sharing. And guys were, 80 or 90% of the men just of their own volition were saying, I want to go home and lead. I want to go home and bring this work, this kind of connection to my community. We had like half of the guys there were like, I'm going home to start a men's group because this is the medicine. Brotherhood is the medicine. And they were just convicted and sure. And there was this felt experience that I'm talking about that I had when I was in treatment, and that I still get all the time now. Like, guys ask me, what's your favorite part of these men's weekends? And I said, sometimes it's the end, that part. And it's not relief that it's over. It's this like, boom, we have landed in that place that we're all looking for together. And there's no drugs, there's no alcohol, there's no devices that got us here. We got each other here through this circling, through what we've done here. And that is a free resource that we can all have. We just need to learn. We need to relearn it. Just like re-villaging, we need to relearn how to be together.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've noticed that like every healing modality I've been a part of, every self-development in, ranging to ceremony work, which I know you've had a relationship with, there's such potent healing that happens personally, but at the end, almost every single time, people are really speaking to, wow, I haven't felt this connection before, this community before. And it's actually one of the things I'm trying to figure out is like, we go to these retreats and we go to festivals and we go to these events and workshops and we feel like, wow, this is it. This is the connection I've been looking for. And then usually everybody has to go off and go live in their separate worlds. And then they all want to forge it back home. Like, how do they do that? Like that seems to be a key piece of the integration, because back in the day, if you did a ceremony, you were with your village. So you leave the ceremony, you're still in the village. But these days, you fly somewhere else, you do a ceremony, you come back home, nobody understands.
Yep. Yeah. And when you go to a music festival or you go to a seminar or training, that experience is created for you. You have this amazing experience of connection that was facilitated for you. And so, yeah, it's a big jump to go home and want to recreate that. And you have to be the one to create that, and, that's what you guys are doing. You're creating a bridge that helps people create that. Cause like, well, where do I start? What do I do? Like, I need some training here. Right. And it's true. That's what we need. And, until now, what the three of us have had to do is go immerse ourselves in community and be a part of it for long enough that it like kind of becomes a part of us. And then we're able to sort of carry that outward in a more natural way. Right. And so, and that makes sense too. Guys come to me sometimes and they say, I want to be a men's work leader. How do I do that? And, where's the training? And I tell them, hey, the training is like by being in men's work. Like, go get your ass into a men's group and emerge as a leader and then start leading. There's no like shortcut there. You can't go get a degree in men's work. You got to go do it. It's very practical. And so is village making. Like there for sure there needs to be like some guidelines and some courses, and here's how you do stuff. But there no substitute for sitting in a room of people and using your voice and bringing your truth and trying to lead folks, because we've all kind of, I think we've leaned back really hard on community. We've just expect community to just be created for us. This is what we have government for. Like we pay taxes and like they do our roads and they take care of the fire department and the police department and all this stuff. Just like, we were born and everything was all built there for us. Grocery stores there, infrastructure, pipes burst, guys show up and they fix them. Like we're sort of babied in that way. And we don't have to be a part of a community in our culture. Like you can actually just be a succubus or a slug or a consumer, just like, not really. You don't have to in this world. You could just work your job, make money, spend money. And there's a whole other level here to our existence that you guys are trying to bring back. And it's like the most important thing.
Yeah. I mean, it is the Matrix in many ways, right? Like you can just basically plug in and, get the shiny car, go to the office, pay your taxes. What is the old saying? You got to make money to spend time doing things you don't like, to earn money, to buy things you don't like, to impress people. I've completely butchered the quote, but you both know what I'm saying.
To pay for a car, to drive to work.
We talk about it like outsourcing village. And I was actually just having a conversation the other night with my aunt about this, and my aunt and uncle have two young children, and it's like, and they just got a dog, and now they need to go back to work more, but because they need to work more, now they have to pay for someone to come walk the dog in the middle of the day, which means they need to work more to pay for the dog sitter. And it's this like vicious cycle of, oh, I got to pay for childcare. Oh, no, I got to pay for someone to grow my food. Oh, I got to pay for this. And it's just like, oh, there's no exit point, right? You can't leave that once you start that flywheel. It takes conscious effort to get out of that stream. And so, yeah, I love this conversation, and I'm really fascinated. Like, to me, you have done sort of the full transition from like growing up in the system, feeling the pain of the system, right? Doing the work, without elders, without people guiding you or showing you, you were just hungry for it, right? So you went and found it, jumped in, you put yourself in every possible position to do the work and to grow and to become a leader. And now, like, having done the personal growth, like huge amount of work necessary, now you're starting to build village, right? Now you're starting to like, oh, I want land. I want like people around me. It's this like kind of comes full circle in a way. And yeah, to me, there's sort of two groups. There's people who have woken up to the, hey, I need village. And they have been, stewarding land for 5 or 10 years, or they've been wanting to do it, but maybe they haven't gone into the personal growth side of it. And maybe, Jasper and I have both, Jasper in particular spent a lot of time traveling the world, spending a lot of time in intentional community, where a lot of them fail because they haven't done the work. Right. They fail because of internal conflict between people, this inability to resolve conflict. And so that's to me is like one side. And the other side are people that are maybe guys that are, say, living in Vancouver. They're in the Brotherhood, they're doing the work, but they don't have village. Right. They go to their men's group. They have an amazing, powerful time. They go to the retreats, but then they come home to their apartment buildings and they're still like, like I don't know my neighbors. I'm still experiencing that loneliness and disconnection. And more men, especially the men at the weekend that we were just at, really like they light up when you start talking about like, are you going to build village? Like, and starting an in-person squad is in many ways like building a village. It's like, village to me is like 10 times more than that. It's like really getting kids involved and elders and like, really doing the full thing. So I have 2 questions after my little intro there. For men who are on the first side, maybe they are living in intentional community, they've been living there for a while. What are some things that you would recommend that they do or could start to do to start integrating men's work? Maybe they've wanted to get the guys together in the community. Maybe they've wanted to bring in some elders, or they've wanted to like open up the conversation around like, hey man, I'd love to like help you support your kids, but like, I don't know, like, but they just feel that like isolation, that uncertainty of where to start. Are there tools, things that you recommend that they could do to start integrating kind of men's work and personal development work into their community?
That's one group. Is there a second group that I'm speaking to?
Well, the second group is more the guys who are maybe still in the city. Maybe they're still, they're in the suburbs, they're in an apartment. They're the guy, and to those men, in my mind, they are doing the work already. For them, it's around what are the steps that they can take to start building village, which is, I see you kind of at the intersection of both of those worlds.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, good question. Yeah, I think for people who are already in community and want to build a deeper sense of connection, I think that's a lot of us, right? Like we're this sense of like being surrounded by lots of people but feeling really alone is something I've heard thousands of times. It is a trademark in 12-step circles because of that sort of like dark pit that lies behind every addiction. But it's also like built into our society and how that works right now, and it's very much in line with Gabor's teachings. And so, yeah, I think what people need to know is that personal growth work isn't just something that you do once, that you go to a seminar when you're 23 and you learn a few things and then it's over. I have heard this piece before where it's like, I've done my work. Now it's time for you to do your work, people who say like, I've done my personal growth journey. Like I've figured my stuff out. I've healed my wounds. I've sorted it all out. Now you need to, that is someone who doesn't realize what their next level is. And, on a more frank level, it's just someone BSing themselves. And we tend to do that a lot. And, humans are very good at spiritual bypassing. Like, oh, I like did this, course or this thing, or I have this religion and therefore like I'm good, and, yeah, what I want to say is that place where you feel like you're done is, a place where you're probably sliding backwards. They say in 12-step programs, you're either growing or you're regressing. There's no like maintaining just like an even keel, And so the personal growth journey is never done. And yes, as you said, Santi, I think both of you guys said at some point, like you can do that on your own. Like you can read the books and you can do the journaling and you can write down your shadow thoughts and you can go off into the woods and do a 3-day solo and survive and do a fast and do these sort of rituals and vision quests, etc. But there's a whole other element of work that needs to be done with other people. I can see things in you that you can't see so clearly. And when there's 10 of me, that is powerful. 10 different perspectives, seeing what's in your periphery. Like my vision gets clearer and clearer and clearer until I get towards the center of my eye. And it's more and more vague the further out I go until I literally can't see it anymore. And your own mind is like that. Your character is like that. How you show up in the world. It's like that. And we need other people to help us see those things. And when we do allow that in, we allow that space, and we take the medicine that's there, it's a vulnerable moment, but it actually connects us deeper to ourselves, because we're actually shedding parts of ourselves that we don't need, and that some of which we don't even really like, right? We're reconnecting back to our essence, and we connect better with other people. So much of the issues and where people are disconnected from each other is because we're jerks to each other, and we isolate, we avoid each other out of anxiety, and we judge each other silently, and we don't share those judgments, and we make ourselves better than others, and we make ourselves worse than others, right? I'm better than you, or I'm worse than you. You're so much better than me. I couldn't be your friend. And from that place, like with those internal messages and that way of relating, like we're fragmented, right? And so if we can heal all of those parts and realize like, oh yeah, basically we're all the same, but with differences, and we love our differences, that brings us together. That only happens in circle. And so, yeah, to come back to your question, for the guys who live in community, and thought that just by being surrounded by people, community would really feel great. You're right to feel like something's missing. And it's not that you need more people or less people. You need better connection between the people that you have. And that means real talk, like more vulnerable conversations, and the tools that are in the inner work communities that have the cleanest essence. Like some inner work communities are very sort of preachy and culty. And most people listening to this know what I'm talking about and have had an experience of that. And they're not every personal growth community is that way. Some of them have just a much more open source, clean way of sharing the essence of their teachings. I believe Arca Brotherhood is one of those places. It's just pretty pure to its original intentions, and there isn't this like ultimate place that people are trying to get to. It's like that wherever that is like internal. What's your ultimate place, and that's what we want men to find for themselves. So for guys who want more connection with other men and they're already living in community, like, yeah, either bring in a men's leader, somebody who has experience, go find mentors. They are out there, guys. Like we often say that, there's no elders, or we have a lack of elders in our society, and there are wise men out there. And I did get to where I am with the help of some very wise men. Most recently, P.T. Mistelberger, Phil Tirtha Mistelberger, who wrote The Way of the Conscious Warrior and started the Arca Brotherhood, formerly Samurai Brotherhood. That man has taught me so much about how to lead other men, and has taught me much about my own mind and about the light side and dark sides of masculinity. And so by learning from him, I've learned how to lead other men, by watching him and by being in his presence, and then by slowly taking on more and more responsibility for myself. So if that's something that you want, start looking for guys who know what they're doing and listen to your gut. A person can walk around and say that they know what they're doing, be like, oh yeah, I have all this experience. But like, if you don't feel a humility from them, and like they're trustable, don't bring them in. We all have to be careful who we look up to and who we choose to follow. because you could end up in Nexium or something that goes pretty bad, right? But yeah, that's what I would say for men who are in community, and for the second group, for guys in the city who are doing the work already. I don't know. I'm biased, but like if you're doing the work already and you if you don't have the connection you're looking for, then choose a different community. Perhaps you're in one that's a little bit too surface level, because there are some that are too surface level. BMI was business network. It's just a business networking thing. Like go find something that goes deeper. And in some cases, if you're me, and you already have your community, you actually need to get out of the city so that you have more space, so that you're not as much in the rat race that we just talked about, where you're like working really hard to pay your super high rent so you can buy the car, so you can drive to work, so you're never at your home, and pay someone to walk your dog. Like, we just got out of the city and our dog walks himself out in the woods. And we don't have to drive to work. I just walk down the road to the office, and our home costs a lot less. So that was a solution for me.
I love it. Yeah, well, we are in the formation stages of what we're calling Revillager Academy, with this Revillaging 101 course, and would love to, when we get down to the brass tacks of actually building it out, would love to maybe sit down and build like a men's work for a village with you, and kind of see what are the tools that a community. I mean, I think Jasper, you'll have had a men's circle in your community, and it's tough, right? It's tough to continually keep that energy alive, especially when the intention isn't necessarily to do the work. I have my own community where we come together to travel and to live together, but the intention isn't necessarily to unpack our shadows. It can be like pushing on folks in ways that they didn't sign up for, right?
Yeah.
And how do you go about creating a container that's safe for that work to emerge slowly over time, so that it doesn't sabotage, so it doesn't sort of erode the fabric of trust that you do need in your community. So just planting that seed. Would love to jam on that one day.
Yeah, that's very cool. That's a great idea, and I would be happy to be involved. Yeah, I just want to like rewind to a thought that I had when you were talking about meeting people who had started intentional communities that didn't work out. And I think that's very common. And it's hard. It's hard to lead a community. It's hard to bring people together and to not have personalities and conflict explode the whole thing. Again, going back to 12 steps, they talk about principles over personalities in that society. The principles are more important than personalities and personal gripes. And they're trying to protect, like they have all these sort of traditions that protect the container, protect the society over the individual. The group needs to, what's the word, that where like the group needs to take precedence over the individual. We were just looking up the definition of it yesterday, but that's really important. And I guess what I want to say is, if you think that you can just like bring people together and like build the right structures on your land and invent a few things and it'll just thrive forever and do really well, you have got another thing coming, because humans have a really great way of allowing our shadow to destroy us. And power isn't inherently negative or bad or evil. You can use power for good and you can use power for evil. Power can be in the light and can be leading from a good place, and power can be in the shadow and in the darkness. And the tricky part here is that it's not always easy to know which side you're on. There's, just as in like shamanism and plant medicine work, there is something called false light, right? Where it like feels light, but it's actually a trick. it's actually BS. That's the case inside all of us and inside every institution in the world. And we all kind of wake up to that when we realize, like, oh, the government has this corruption, and like, oh, money has infiltrated its place here, and clearly that's like that's dark, and somehow that's allowed. It's sort of permeated the whole thing, and it happens in communities. And what we need are more social structures to foster honesty, authenticity, humility, service, and to cleanse resentment, and to communicate properly, so that stuff doesn't build up. Because what we tend to do is in the absence of like real check-ins and connection and conversation with each other, a lot of us sort of fill in the blanks with negativity. It's just kind of how we're wired. We default to that side because it's safer. But what you end up doing is blowing up your relationships and ending up alone. And it is easier in the short term to live alone. It's way easier for me to live in a tiny apartment, just me and my cat and my routines and my predictability. And I know what's going to happen in my day. But man, is my life small. It's harder to live in a place that's big, where there's more pieces on the board, and there's like unpredictability, and, somebody might sabotage me here, or, I have this opportunity here, but what if I fail? And people want me to lead, but I'm afraid to lead. Like, just all of this stuff that comes in community, the richness of life. It's riskier, it's scarier, but it's what we're made to do. And so we need social fabric, social tools to learn how to relate with one another, and so what we've got something with ARCA and the men's group, and men being honest with each other and challenging each other. Like, hey, I see, like, you say one thing, but then you do another, and I'm going to call you out on that in front of all these guys here. Not because I want to put you down or because I'm trying to climb the social ladder, but because I want to trust you, and because you're beside me, because we're brothers, and I want to be able to trust your word. And that's a very clean, proper use of this sort of challenging energy and in circle. And we also need to learn how to do conscious relationship work. Like what is a conscious relationship versus a relationship where we're just kind of using each other for our own gain? We got to turn that ship around, because that is kind of what we learn in this world, is that it's kind of like dog eat dog, and then we just got to use each other and leverage our reputation and leverage our connections. But again, like, real authentic human connection is way more than that game.
Yeah, well said. In conscious relationship work, we often talk about the mirror of the other. Your romantic partner is mirroring you, and the things that you don't see. And I often joke about community is like a fun house of mirrors. You're just like wandering through this like massive array of reflections, and some of them are twisted and weird and warpy.
Yeah.
And not all of them are clear. Like a relationship romantically can be a bit more clear. Obviously it's warped as well, but yeah, it can be really overwhelming for people who have this idea of community, and then when they actually get into it, it's like, whoa, this is way more than I can handle, especially if they haven't been doing a lot of the personal work. And I noticed too, coming back to your piece around like the government and leadership, it's like most people I encounter in the intentional community movement are, part of this quote unquote alternative culture, moving towards, revillaging and intentional community. And a lot of them come from a place of deep distrust and anti-authoritarianism. Yeah. Because we grew up with parents we didn't trust, with governments we didn't trust, with corporations we didn't trust, and it's still like that. And there's valid reason for all of that, but it's like a core wound of distrust. Yep. And then that becomes, well, fuck you, I don't want you to tell me what to do. Yeah. And so then you get these groups of people that are like, okay, let's live where we all agree on everything. And it's like, it's impossible. Yeah. And there's such a fear of leadership.
Yeah.
There's such a fear of someone taking the reins and saying like, no, we should do this. And also the fear of like my own fear of like, oh, can I be the leader? What if I fuck up? What if I lead the pack into wolves, or whatever it may be? And then I have to deal with that in front of everybody. And it's a very humbling experience as a leader to do that. So I think that's one of the biggest like learning curves for communities and growth edges that I think a lot of us in communities and moving towards community need to really focus on is, apart from just like trying to figure out how to agree on things, it's like figuring out how we work together in leadership. And we can take turns. It's not like it has to be a single leader, but like you were saying with principles, across the board, intentional communities that succeed either have like a single leader, which can get pretty culty pretty quick.
Yeah.
Or they have some guiding principle. Usually it's a religion or a spirituality that is so deep that no matter what happens, they all can rest back into this bigger purpose.
Mm-hmm.
That like, okay, it's not about like we're having a conflict, but we're going to figure it out because we care more about the group or the land or God, whatever it is, than this problem.
Yep.
And we see that this is a problem for everybody because it's a problem between us, so we're willing to work on it. And apparently in Celtic villages, they always had a tree in the center, and the tree was considered the tree of life. And if it started to wither or die, like they would see that there was something wrong in the village. And it was a symbol of like, we're here doing this thing together for a bigger purpose. And in indigenous cultures, it was often for the future generations. It was about the kids. Like we're doing this because we want to keep going and our spirit is going to keep going. And so we need to create something to hold the future generations. And that's another thing I think we've lost in our culture, just thinking ahead, not being so fucking centered on the moment and what I can get now. But let me bring this segue now into something that's near and dear to my heart and I know yours as well, which is fatherhood and children. And you just had a beautiful baby girl. I just had a beautiful baby girl. We were traveling together when our wives were pregnant. Like we have this cool relationship around that. And fatherhood for me was the central catalyst wanting to find and create village. So wow, I don't have a village, and that's terrifying. And everybody knows the saying, it takes a village to raise a child. What that actually means in the modern world, most people have no clue. Like most people do not have a village. And so like, yeah, parents feel the pain really deeply. Like you were saying, seeing that mom, like screens are the free babysitter.
Yeah.
Like I get it. I totally get it. And having a 10-year-old, like I've been through my struggles with the relationship between technology and my kid. But it's like, yeah, like you don't have money, you're stressed, you're tired, you're addicted to your phone, and you have this little black screen that you can give them, and then they're totally pacified.
Yep.
Like that's going to be obviously a route that a lot of parents take out of survival. But kind of coming back to your journey with fatherhood, and I'm really curious, what your experience has been so far as a father, and I know that with a baby that's young, fathers are almost more like we're almost like the support staff. Mom is doing a lot more work, and we're kind of supporting the context of that. And as they grow, we get more of a role, but nonetheless, you are providing an important role. And why does village matter in that context to you? And how do you think, I guess similar to Santi's question of like, there's a lot of dads out there struggling. I meet a lot of them in men's work. I meet a lot of them outside of men's work. And there's just this kind of like normalization. Like, oh yeah, being a dad means you don't have time, you don't have money, you don't have energy, you don't have friends. And it's hard and it sucks, and you just got to get through those years. And I don't believe that that's true. And I think it's normalized because of our individualistic culture. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on, fatherhood in relationship to community, to village, and even to the development work, because, similar to community, it's like you need to do your own trauma work so that you can be in community in a healthy way. Same with dads, right? If you don't do your trauma work and your shadow work, all of that is being passed to your kids.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, so like part of our job is just to do that work. And curious your
Yeah.
thoughts.
Yeah. There's so much there. Yeah. Definitely part of it, you know, if you want to be a good parent, my assertion is that you need to do your own inner work as it relates to your parenting, your programming around parenting. Basically, if you do nothing, you will probably unconsciously recreate your childhood scene, whether you like it or not. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to who had a certain scene with their mother and father, or an absent father or an absent mother when they were kids, and somehow couldn't, just irresistibly, unconsciously created that scene in one way or another. And I can tell you, I've also talked to an equal number of people who swung the pendulum so far to the other side of whatever their dad was, that they became the opposite problem, let's say, you know, the tyrant and the weakling, right? If you look at the archetype of the king, conscious king, there's the conscious king, and then the shadow is the tyrant king, and the other shadow is the weakling king. And so some of you listening to this may have had a father who felt like a tyrant. He was just overbearing, never good enough for him. He abused his power. And you told yourself you would never be that. And so you became soft, apologetic, never really asserting your power, laissez-faire, disconnected, withdrawn, and unwilling to really hold responsibility. And you become the weakling. So, yeah, as you said, we all need to see that. We need to do our work to see that stuff in ourselves and see how we're showing up as that. See what are your wounds with your parents, and how are those wounds manifesting in your life? You know, you spoke about how people check out of society because they don't trust the power structures of the world, and then they all get together in a circle in a community, and then they want to have a community and a society without power structures. And some people believe that that's possible. And I think you're right around having a guiding authority. You give the power away to an outside structure, but in general, you're still going to need people to lead. You're still going to have power structures, and if you have somebody to step up into power when the rest of the society resents power and doesn't trust it, they are going to burn that person at the stake. They're going to destroy what that person tries to create, rather than get behind it in the spirit of creation, creativity, and coming together, right? And so you can see how these are wounding can sort of destroy our opportunities for togetherness and for community. And so as a father, you can do that to your kids. You know, you can take your own rejection of power, or, you know, your tyrant or your weakling, and bring that to your child and pass it on. And so the alternative is to sit in circle and to do our shadow work, to be held by a community that keeps us in integrity and refines our character slowly over time, so that we can show up more cleanly and pure with our kids. And community is so important. That work, again, it doesn't really happen on your own. You can do a lot inside by sitting in a temple in Tibet for a few years, but I can tell you, I know men who were deeply in that place. I know a man who was a monk for decades and came out to do his work with the group and to keep going deeper. He had plenty of things to learn after spending that much time as a monk, and he prefers to be out here in the world doing that work. So yeah, man, we need each other as dads and moms, as parents. And I think my wife would go crazy if she didn't feel the support of the community around us. In those hardest moments where you feel like you're going to crack, those are the moments where you're sort of held by other people psychically or physically to get through it. And that the life of a single mother who feels disconnected and unsupported by society is, I just can't imagine. I can't imagine, because it's already hard. It's hard, seeing and experiencing in some cases what it's like to be in that bubble when things are really hard and when you're low on sleep and when you don't know what to do. And the thing that gets us through, and particularly the thing that gets my wife through in these moments where her body is so taxed, and her sleep and her attention and she has a business and all of this stuff, all these moving parts, it's being held by others, so I think that's an essential piece. And we had this beautiful thing that that you were part of, Jasper, where we did like what's called a blessing way, or a baby blessing ceremony, where we had 30 people come before our baby came, and we had this whole ceremony with songs, and we planted a tree, and everybody gave us a prayer, and all the men pulled me aside and did this men's ceremony for me to like give me strength and courage and wisdom before the baby came. And I can't tell you how full we felt coming out of that and going into the birth process, and how supported we felt. Like that is what I want for every person, is for them to feel held in that way.
That was a beautiful experience.
Yeah.
Sharing that with you. Yeah. 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 I mean, again, I think everything we've been speaking to really points to doing that work with each other. And I think there's some really amazing, potent communities everywhere. And a lot of them happen online now, which is great. And I always encourage people, if you can find an online one that also has an in-person, like, do that. If you can find in-person ones, do that. Like, there's something different, obviously, about being in person with people that just can't be replicated on a screen. That said, if you can't do that and you need to be on the screen, that's totally fine. My men's group is on a screen, and it's super powerful. And yeah, the ARC has been huge for me, and there's a lot of dads there. And so, if anyone listening is a dad, like, men's groups are incredible. There's other dads there, and they're doing the work, and that's one way to connect and help your kids. And luckily, there's also a lot of women's circles, and I feel like they've almost been ahead of the game on those pieces for a little while now.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I find that women gather in these smaller one-off circles, and women ask, like, is there a women's society that's like ARCA? And I actually don't think there is, and I think it's just in the nature of femininity to not organize in that way. It's sort of more organic and localized, and so I advise women to look where they are for the wise women and ask them about women's circles. Go find the women who are like in the work and who know themselves and who feel really grounded and in touch, and those women are usually part of women's groups. Whereas men, we love these like big structures that are almost militaristic, and like the Freemasons, and there's lots of men's communities now that are modern and sort of organized, and where there's hundreds of guys, and everyone's like, cool, I'll join hundreds of guys, like, let's go. Like, how do I become a leader? It's just we're a little different that way, I find. And and these days, in a way, like, we're lucky because those things are there. So I think to sum things up, if people want to connect to the type of work that I do, ARCA is kind of like my nonprofit side of things, the side of my work that's more nonprofit. This is a men's community that has 55-ish groups occurring in places all over the world, 15 of which are online. Same guys, same leader, same time every week, same place. And guys just go deep together. And we also do these in-person weekends that I spoke of that are just super powerful for guys. So that's ARKA Brotherhood at arcabrotherhood.com. And we're at Arca Brotherhood on Instagram. And then my brand is Evolving Man. I'm a coach. I do men's work, addiction recovery work, and conscious relationship work. Primarily teaching this stuff and sharing this stuff with men. My website is evolvingman.com, and I'm creating a community as well that guys can join if they want to sort of plug in with me and stay connected to some of my free offerings, breathwork circles, office hours, that kind of thing on a platform called Circles. So there's I'll put a link in my Instagram, in my link tree, and people can just go there and click on that to join the community and stay connected to me and to the other men who are in this work. And so guys who want to get into men's work, but they're not in ARCA, or they just have questions, or they just want to get to know me more and learn whether I'm a trustable human, they can join that community and connect to other guys, and maybe even find other guys in their area to start a men's group with.
Yeah. And you're can't recommend your programs enough. I mean, if men are listening and addiction, I think, does extend largely to screens, to porn, to anything that you go seeking some level of basic human need. We go to social media because Facebook and Instagram promised, if you use this, you will get social connection. You will feel deeply satisfied. You will feel like that nutrient of human connection has been met. But you go there and you don't get that need met. And so you get this like massive drop of dopamine, and you get this addiction loop, which is like, well, maybe next time I go online, I'll finally get that connection. And yeah, if you're listening and you recognize that you struggle dating, you struggle making connections, your relationship with porn isn't healthy, like there's your addiction offering, I think, is amazing and so helpful for men in that space. And yeah, it's amazing to be building a technology platform where we're talking to healers. We're talking to people that are doing the work and are deeply in it. I think that's sort of the power of Revillagers, that no other technology platform that I know of is trying to actually integrate the reach and the power of technology with the healing power of people that are really doing the work. And yeah, man, we'll make sure to link to all of your offerings, including CRC. Is that you?
The Conscious Relationship
in there.
Conscious Relationship Council. That's a group, a live course that I run with Nick Solacek, where we teach men conscious relationship tools to use in their romantic relationships. Guys love that program. We have like 20 handouts that we give guys in 12 weeks. And it's not just handouts, it's like live coaching and the real integration of these tools that are not invented by us. We learned them from masters, and we are sharing them with guys. So we're sort of taking the best of what we've learned from other people and then doing it in like a men's work group format. It's awesome. So if guys who want to level up their relationships, check out the CRC. And then I have a private group that I run for guys in addiction recovery that guys can find as well. So yeah, thanks guys. I love what you're doing here with Revillager. I love your vision, and let's go. Let's keep building.
Let's go. Thanks, Ben. Really appreciate your time. All right. See you, brothers.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, brothers.